Welcome to Trulyfit.
All right, Rebecca, welcome to the Trulyfit Podcast for, who knows, the 10th or 11th time here. Why don't you give the listeners who may be listening for the first time and don't know you a quick background on who you are and your credentials, your bona fides.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think this probably is our 10th time. For anyone who hasn't heard one of our podcasts before, we are related. We do have the same last name. We are siblings. I live in Miami Beach. I have a private nutrition practice here, and I focus on weight loss and metabolic health.
On Mondays, the podcasts are either interview podcasts where I have someone on in the fitness or health or medical space that's interconnected with fitness or health. Maybe they have a supplement company. Maybe they're an expert on something, a nutritionist, a personal trainer. Or I do these podcasts with Rebecca where we sit down and we talk about trending topics. They're longer form podcasts. On Thursdays are my quick, short podcasts where I just focus on one thing. Today, we're going to go down some trending topics. You should see those trending topics on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening, we will be saying those topics in advance. The first one here is the Diet Coke Challenge. Have you seen this? If not, do I need to describe this before we talk about this?
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, so walk me through it.
So I believe it's now trending. I'm not good at understanding what's trending and what's not. These are not the things that I see virality-wise, but there was a girl who basically put all of the Diet Cokes like in a box. So we could see them from the outside, we being the viewers. She can't see them. And there are straws attached to them. They've done these videos before, like funny videos where like, what are you tasting kind of deals. But this was just 5 different Diet Coke versions. There was a Wendy's one, there was a McDonald's one, there was a Chick-fil-A one, there was a bottle one, there was a can one, right? There was all these different iterations, and she got every single one right. She could tell the difference of each Diet Coke, and I thought it was amazingly impressive. But really what I wanted to focus on is not that, is that do you have any foods or any drinks where you think you could do the same thing, blindfolded?
I wonder how many Diet Cokes she has had to drink to reach that level of expertise, right? Like, what is it, in the thousands? So mine's not interesting, and I bet I can guess what yours is. So when I'm done telling mine, I want to guess yours. I am a water snob. So if you put bottled water in front of me, Aquafina, Dasani, Fiji, like the mineral waters, Fiji, Evian, I know what they are. And I have a preference. Like, I don't love the mineral waters, even though they're more expensive. The Evians and the Fijis, I don't like the taste of them. And so, you know, at home, we do have a water purifier, but sometimes it takes too long. And if I forget to fill it, in order to let it filter down, it doesn't work. So we just have to grab bottled water. And we're typically buying here Aquafina or Dasani, because that's what's just widely available at the stores. But I hate Dasani. I don't like the taste of it. It has a very distinct taste, and it's interesting because if you read the labels and you go on the website, both Aquafina and Dasani are purified by reverse osmosis, and they're headquartered in New York, right? So the water should be coming from the same place. But yeah, I can definitely do that with bottled water. I'm gonna guess yours. You recently have like gotten obsessed with apples, so I feel like you could really pinpoint an apple.
I think I could pinpoint an apple, but that's not the first thing that came to mind. The first thing that came to mind for me is really weird, but it's just something I've had my entire life, and I'm very picky about it, is ketchup. So I could definitely tell the difference between all the iterations of ketchup, whether it's, you know, there's even within its own brand. So there's like, you know, Heinz has sugar-free ketchup, or they have organic, or they have, you know, vine-ripened tomatoes ketchup, and then, you know, the difference between Heinz and Hunt's, and the difference between like the organic brands that are from the store. Like, I know the difference between the ketchups. I can tell.
That's so funny. Yeah, I think we definitely need to put that on TikTok. We need to do a video of you testing different ketchups.
And you wonder what it is. Like, I'm sure it's just like a ratio of things sometimes. So the ratio of, there's not that many ingredients in ketchup. It's a lot of times it's like vinegar, onion powder, obviously tomatoes, and a little bit of sugar or something. So it's like, it has to be, when you're talking about things that are not that complex and there's only 3 or 4 ingredients, it has to be ratios, I would imagine, of said ingredients. Much like water, which is really confusing. I know that you said that, but I mean, I certainly feel the same way. I can't tell the differences between a lot of water, but I can drink water and be like, this is really good. I can drink a lot of this. And I can drink other water and be like, I don't really like this. But yet the ingredients are typically the same exact thing, right? Or they could be coming from the same exact place. So it is really confusing as to, what sort of micronutrients or minerals are in that water to make it taste that specific.
Yeah. Just a fraction of a difference in one of the minerals. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't taste good. But that's funny about ketchup. How often are you using ketchup these days? Or was that a thing of the past? Like, are you still using it every meal?
You know what? This is a whole nother topic. I feel like ketchup gets this really bad rap. Like people think like the ketchup condiment is like it's like ingesting, I don't know, alcohol or some sort of cancer-ridden, insect repellent. I'm like, it's my ketchup is, look on the back of it. It's organic tomatoes, no added sugar. Again, like onion powder and vinegar. That's all that's in it. It's got a total of maybe three natural sugars per serving. Maybe I use 2 servings at a time. Like calorically, it's not heavy, it's not dense. I use maybe 2 servings worth of ketchup a day. Again, like that's like 50 calories worth of ketchup a day on my eggs in the morning. But yes, I use ketchup, I would say, on a daily basis. What is your hate for ketchup?
So I don't hate ketchup. I personally don't like the taste of it. I'm a mustard girl, and I know you have a whole thing on mustard, but I don't know if people so much like vilify ketchup. I think that some people are trying to pass ketchup off as a vegetable, and then you get the pushback, right? Because
Really?
honestly, in the school lunch program for a while, they were when they were trying to work it out, they were considering like ketchup on your French fries a vegetable, and it's like, this is outrageous. This does not count. So I think it's the pushback that you're feeling. But no, I think especially if you're buying the organic and the real stuff with not high fructose corn syrup and added sugar, then you're good to go. Especially if it's going to make you eat healthier foods, right? I tell my clients, like, if you want to use ketchup, if you want to use mustard, if you want to use ranch dressing, and it's going to help you eat your vegetables, do it. Do it.
So I get it from both sides, though. Here's the problem with ketchup. So you have the people who really don't know anything about food, right? They don't understand like caloric value and macronutrients and micronutrients and how anything works. Just the general population. There's nothing wrong with that, right? They have other things to do in their life. They group all condiments together. They have no idea the difference between honey mustard. Look at honey mustard. The ingredients in honey mustard are neither honey or mustard, right? It's just like soybean. It's just soybean oil.
Sugar, yeah.
It's soybean oil and sugar and like some weird like chemicals, right?
Natural flavors, yeah.
And then and mayo and mustard and ketchup and hot sauce. They couldn't be more different, all of these things I just named, right? Like hot sauce is just pure sodium, and then you have ketchup, which is obviously a derivative of comes from tomatoes, but depends on what else is in it. Then you have mayo, which depends on what's in your mayo, and all of these things are so different. But people just group who don't otherwise know better condiments as condiments, and they go, all condiments are bad. That's what I was told. And then you have the other people, right? The hyper obsessed people who think that like any extra calorie or anything that's not perfectly organic or special has sugar in it is going to kill you instantly and take years off your life. So that's the problem that I have, is when you live in the middle and you're just like, no, I use ketchup once a day, 1 serving of it. There's not that many people who live in my world.
I wonder if you're also getting pushback from people who have what they would consider a more refined palate. Because I remember growing up, like mom was like, I just made this meal and you're going to put ketchup on it? Like, are you kidding? So I bet there's some people too that turn their nose up like, oh, he's using ketchup, because there's other condiments like that, right? When we go to a sushi place, my husband and I love spicy mayo. And sometimes if it's like a really traditional sushi place, they kind of like side eye you. And I'm like, just give me what I want. Like, I'm paying for it. I really want the spicy mayo. Give it to me. So yeah, I think there's probably some culinary experts out there who would frown upon your use of ketchup.
The refined palate conversation, that's a whole nother thing we can go down sometime. I have no control over my taste buds. I put something in my mouth, my taste buds send signals to my brain, and then my brain tells me if I like something or not, right? So like, I can't control it. I do what my brain tells me. It's like the wine snobs who say like, oh, this is like really great wine. They like proved it all wrong, right? They've sat down with all of these like quote unquote wine experts, and they gave them what they were considering $2,000 bottles of wine. They're telling them that, this comes from this region in France, and it was just $6 bottle of wine. They couldn't tell the difference. So, the refined palate stuff is a little bit overkill. I like what I like. What can I do?
Hey, no judgment here.
Benadryl and dementia. There was a lot going around about this a few years ago from some Alzheimer's studies. I'm somebody who probably for a while was taking maybe like one Benadryl a month just because it was the best antihistamine for me personally. Nothing else really worked. Claritin didn't work at all. Zyrtec was okay, but Benadryl really just like would wipe away my allergies for like 3 or 4 days if I took one at night. So I am hesitant to take it and all these sort of class 1 antihistamines now. After reading more, do you know anything about this? And do you want to sort of lead the way explaining this, or do you want me to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I also saw those studies that came out, and it's not new news, right? Like we've sort of known about it for a while, and it's because, like you said, Benadryl is a first generation antihistamine. It works really well, like it knocks you out, but it's not as advanced as some of these others, right? Like the Claritin or the Zyrtec. And so these first generation antihistamines, although you think you're getting a good sleep, right? Like for me, it literally knocks me out for 24 hours. I'm like a zombie, but it's preventing you from REM sleep. And that's what's most significant because, if it's reducing the amount of REM sleep that you actually get, that's going to affect you in a number of ways. It's going to affect your memory. REM sleep is when we transfer short-term memories into long-term memories. It's also when the brain starts to repair itself, right? If there are like neurons that have been damaged in any way, that's when the brain repairs. And that's when our body, repairs itself, so our immune system. So they're finding this not just with first generation antihistamines like Benadryl, but also benzodiazepines, so things like Xanax and Klonopin that a lot of people take, where it feels like, I don't know if you've ever taken them, it feels like you're getting great sleep. You're like, oh, I had the best sleep, but the quality of sleep is different, right? So it may put you to sleep, but if you have any type of like fitness tracker, like my Oura Ring can track when I'm in deep sleep, when I'm in REM sleep, and you can actually see the difference. Alcohol can do this too, right? You feel like, oh, you drink a lot of alcohol, you fall asleep quickly, but then you're not well rested the next day. And it's because you're not getting enough deep sleep and enough REM sleep. And so that's what it's affecting. And so there's been a lot of studies linking lack of sleep, poor quality sleep, to dementia, to conditions like Alzheimer's. Even though we haven't found a specific root cause for dementia, there are a lot of contributing factors. And so poor quality sleep is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and I do think mechanistically, some of the studies have shown that it can block acetylcholine, which is important for memory and thinking and things of that nature, which they also believe, in conjunction with lack of proper REM sleep, could be a reason why it does lead to a dementia. It at least, if nothing else, it looks correlative to raising the risk of dementia. So why is it even worth it, right, at this point? Like, especially like on a regular, like the usage of it on a regular basis. I have not done a deep dive on allergy medicine like as a whole. It's something like I can't really comment on. I'm going to, because my daughter is like riddled with allergies. She went to the allergist, and basically the panel was like, your daughter has every allergy that's ever existed to man. I'm like, great, this is going to be a fun next 15 years. But it's, there are no free lunches, as I say, right?
Yeah.
And I do want to do some more due diligence into these allergy medications before I give them to my daughter on sort of a daily basis, right? Which is now the prescription, unfortunately, for someone like my daughter. Is like, hey, you got to get ahead of this. You need to use this preemptively, proactively, so that she doesn't get allergies. I'm a little bit hesitant, to say the least.
Yeah, I remember growing up, I had bad allergies, and I remember I was taking the maximum dose of Allegra every day and calling the pediatrician. Maybe I was like 16 and being like, can we up my dose? This is before it was over the counter. And she was like, no, you're at the maximum dose. And I was like, I'm still having symptoms like runny nose. I was always congested. And for me, it was lifestyle induced. It was some of the food I was eating, but yeah, all that to say, when you're talking about your daughter, that is the first line. It's like, let's put them on a medication for the rest of their lives. But what are those effects, right? And you can build a tolerance like I did, where now Granted, it's 15 years later, but I'll take allergy medication 1 week out of the year when spring hits here, and there's lots of pollen in the air. But in general, I don't need it. So I think that there are lifestyle modifications you can make. There are also some herbs you can use. So nettle is a popular herb to use for certain allergies, and very safe and very effective.
There was a point in which I was maybe overdoing allergy medication. I had like an onset allergies, and I was taking, Claritin in the mornings, and then sometimes Benadryl at night. I don't also think those things are supposed to be mixed, to be honest with you.
It specifically says in the package, like, do not take this with any other antihistamine.
Yeah, so I was like mixing in histamines. I don't know. I had some sort of crazy rebound effect where I was out one day with my daughter and my wife. We were strolling around like a local downtown, and I've never had a feeling like this where I basically for like 5 hours straight couldn't go more than 30 seconds without blowing my nose. And I don't know if it's considered like a rebound effect, like mechanistically. I don't know if that was the action that was happening in my body, but something happened wherein it wasn't just the allergens in the air, because I've never had this anywhere, where I know the medication was involved in the process, which also sort of scared me away. But it could have been just what you said, is that I had blocked the antihistamines for too long. And I had grown tolerance to it.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of good options, because it's the antihistamines, or depending upon the allergy you're talking about, right? We're not talking about peanut allergies like anaphylaxis. They have different steroids, but that too that's not something you want to be on long term. So I think whatever you're taking, you need to think through and do your research, right? There shouldn't be any medication that you're taking regularly, because you do find out years later, oh wow, it has this effect on sleep or acetylcholine, and that can affect overall brain health. So it's just important to be, I think, aware and be an active participant in your health and your family's health, right? And not just like nod and take anything that's given to you.
I want to jump here to food safety. Recently, my daughter started a new daycare, and unfortunately, this is the first time I have to pack a lunch. Now, they don't have refrigerators at this daycare. So basically, inside of a really good thermos lunchbox, I put ice packs of all sorts. I put ice around it. There is milk in there. Sometimes I make her like a cream cheese bagel. What should I be concerned with? What are the hours that are associated with these things? Are there foods you're just saying like, absolutely not, never do this if you don't know exactly what the temperature is? Like, give me some sort of general guidance and specific guidance.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the world of making lunch every morning. I feel like for whatever reason, it adds 20 minutes to my day. Okay, great question. Technically, the USDA says dairy products specifically, if they are above 40 degrees for 2 hours, you should toss them, because the risk of developing a foodborne illness increases significantly. But I think that depends on how good your thermos is and how good your lunchbox is, right? Is it the little plastic things that we had growing up, or is it something that's actually sealed and contained? The other thing to think about is, are you giving her something that's sealed? Are you giving her a string cheese, right, that's already in its package, or a yogurt that hasn't been opened? Because those are much safer, and I think those have a longer shelf life. But if you're taking something out of a jar, if you're taking cottage cheese out of the container from your fridge and putting it in, or if you're taking anything out of a container and pouring it, then the risk of contamination increases, right? And that's part of the reason why they'll tell you, if you look on your milk carton, it'll say, expiration date could be August 30th, but use within 7 days of opening, right? So if 7 days of opening is August 15th, they still want you to toss it after 7 days, because the risk of opening it and having it open in your fridge and pouring it out and having different people touch it, right? The risk of contamination rises. So you have to think about how the food is packaged, and then also consider in your home how many different people are in the fridge and touching it, and how was it prepared, and are you preparing it in a safe way, right? Because at home, if you're cooking food at night, right, say you're meal prepping, how long are you leaving that out on the counter, right? If you leave that out on the counter overnight, you forget about it, well, then the risk exponentially increases. They estimate that every 20 minutes these foodborne illnesses, these organisms can double. So it becomes dangerous at that point. But I think, depending upon how risk averse you are, most daycares don't have refrigerators. Ours doesn't. So I pack it. We have a good lunchbox with a good thermos. You can heat or cool, the thermos to like keep everything at the appropriate temperature. And you have to, there are a lot of variables to consider there.
In addition to that, it just makes packing lunches so much harder because of all the things you just named. They won't heat the lunches at this particular place. This is just me complaining now. This has nothing to do with what you said. They won't heat the lunches, and I can't put it in the refrigerator. So like now my options to pack lunch for my daughter, unless I just want to take an hour out of my day to like drop the lunch off each day, are so limited on what she could potentially eat and possibly eat, which makes it all the more difficult if you want if you want them to eat in general, get enough calories, as we all do as parents, and then also eat healthy.
I know, and it sounds so simple, but so Fridays at our little school daycare is pizza day, so I don't pack her lunch, and the mornings feel so free and liberating. I'm like, I don't have to pack a lunch this morning because there are all those things. It's like, what can I make what can I warm up in this thermos? And then you have to preheat the thermos, and then I have to heat up the meal. Then I have to put that together. Then what can I put in these other compartments that can stay at room temperature but are still like palatable, right? And she's going to eat, and it's it's a whole thing that messes with my mind. A whole other thing to think about.
You also just sort of, what you just said was a little bit in a vacuum, meaning we're also not talking about, okay, what did we eat the day before? Because I don't necessarily want to give them the same things the day before. What are we having for dinner that night, right? So like I make dinner for my family. I make my wife's lunch, and I make my child's lunch. So it's like all those foods have to sort of interconnect somehow. So it's quite the process.
Do you have a lunchbox with a proper little thermos for? Okay.
Yeah, it's got a proper thermos. I put ice packs in it. I have like special ice packs for it. I'm not really concerned with the milk because of the fact that it's surrounded by ice and it's in its own little thermos that's already keeping it cold. And I've been in the daycare; the room is of normal temperature. So nothing to be concerned with there. But, I also did, not to get too off topic here, but I remember seeing a documentary maybe about a year ago where like they were showing it where romaine lettuce in California was like one field away from where these cows were shitting, and they're using the same water. And they're saying like, don't eat bagged lettuce ever, because like that's where all the E. coli comes. But it's really hard for me not to eat bagged lettuce because it makes my life easier.
Yeah, it's convenience, right? So you have to, it's like, what is your risk? How risk averse are you? Risk versus convenience. I get it. But overall, I don't think it's anything parents need to panic about. I'm hoping the conditions in everyone's home are clean and you're not serving leftovers that are 6 days old. So as long as you're cooking in a, in a proper way and storing it right in your home, it being in the lunchbox. I mean, my daughter eats at 11:30, and I'm usually like, I'm dropping her off at school at 8:30. It shouldn't be that big of a deal.
The Federal Trade Commission recently, well, actually they approved this a while ago, but now apparently it's being set forth here. It's being put in place. One-click cancellations. Now this is for companies like cable companies or gyms who put you on a subscription or membership basis, and they're larger corporations and companies in which, in order to get off of that, you have to jump through all these hoops. Sometimes like to get off of it for like Comcast or something, you have to like show up on site to like a local Comcast or something. It's like, well, who could do that if you're like if you're a single mother of 4 kids and you're working 9 to 5 and like Comcast closes at 4:30 and they're not open on the weekends? It's like, you just can't cancel. So you end up leaving it. So one-click cancellations were officially approved. They're going to push that through. And this is yet another reason why I believe Planet Fitness and gyms that are similar to Planet Fitness, but Planet Fitness specifically, are going to fail because they're based off of members who just don't come to the gym. And one of the reasons why they don't come to the gym and they still pay is because it's so difficult to cancel. It's such a large barrier to entry. And people go, well, it's only $10 a month. And what happens is you try to cancel, it doesn't work. And then you have this cognitive dissonance in your mind that tells you, maybe I'll go next week anyway. Do I really want to spend this time canceling a $12 membership? Nah, I'll make sure to go next week. That's worth my $12. I'll get there once and they don't cancel. Now with the one-click cancellation, you're going to be losing a lot of members who don't go to the gym, but you still have all the members who go to the gym And then
Right.
so that now the gyms are packed, right? You get it on one end, and then now you don't have the extra memberships of people just paying and not going.
Right. I wonder, you mentioned the cognitive dissonance. I wonder how much of that guilt sort of will keep people hanging in there, even with the one click, right? Because it's like, well, listen, I didn't get to go to the gym this week, but I have the membership and I'll go next week. I
Yeah.
didn't get to go today because X, Y, or Z came up, but I'm going to go tomorrow. So, like, just having the ability to go to the gym, even if people aren't going, I wonder if that will sort of keep them as members.
I think so on a regular basis, but what we have to be concerned with, we being like the gym community, if you care about it, is just an economic downturn, which happened a lot, right? If you look at history, basically every 12 years we have a large economic downturn. We haven't had one in a while. It might be coming soon. So when you have something like a 2008 crash, then people are looking for those extra costs to cut, and a lot of times that's things like the gym. That's subscriptions. It's not food. It's not something that people need.
Yeah.
Also trends, right? There's trends from time to time. New information, new science comes out. People go, oh, you know what? It is good to jog. It is good to do body weight stuff.
Yeah.
It's bad to lift heavy. It's taking years off our life. Whatever the new trend is might lead you for the next generation. Like right now, they're getting Gen Z who loves to lift heavy because they love vanity, because they get to put pictures of themselves all over the internet. But you might have a backlash from the next generation that goes, I'm sick of seeing all these people trying to show their triceps off on the internet, and we're just going to work out at home. And like we're going to do Pilates reformer at home, and it's about comfort and being in a room with other people and group fitness, and not about like going to gym. So you don't really know where the trends are going. It's subject to the wind. So I just think it's a big risk.
Yeah.
Whole Foods freezer veggies. I saw a video recently. I don't know if this is true or not. I didn't look it up, but there was a video that this guy put out saying most of their brand, whatever it is, like 360 Market or something, comes from China. Is this true? Do you know anything about this? If so, is this bad? Is this one of these things where we go, well, who cares that it comes from China? It's freeze dried. China has some regulations. US brings it over. We oversee it. Or is this like, is this news that people heard in your industry and were like, holy shit, we need to look into this?
Well, I think for people who, it's always been there on the label, right? So it's like for people like me who read labels, for other nutrition professionals who read every label of every food they pick up, it's not a surprise and it's not that big of a deal. But I think for other people, it is a surprise. But let me start off by saying that there are quality controls in place, right? It's not just the wild, wild west. So if the US gets organic produce, organic anything from other countries, we have to evaluate that country's organic certification program. So there's like an application and an accreditation process and compliance reviews and then regular reassessments, right? So granted, I think USDA is probably underfunded. We maybe don't have enough people there, but there are people whose job it is to make sure that other countries have the same standards that we have. The problem is food from China is often contaminated with elements that we're not testing for. So China has a lot of pollution, right? They're very overpopulated. So they have pollution in their air, in their water, in their soil. And so the plants are naturally going to absorb those contaminants, heavy metals and other toxic contaminants from the air and the water and the soil, and it's going to be in the plant. And so, we're not necessarily testing for that, and neither is China. So that's where the complication lies. But I don't want to say it's just in China. There are FDA recalls on things from the US. Just this last year, there was an FDA recall on pouches of applesauce made here in the US because they had high levels of lead. And this is because, I think it was grown in California, but it's that certain plants absorb heavy metals from the soil. And so it wasn't like, the company is injecting heavy metals into it's in the plant because the plant is absorbing it from the soil.
Sure.
And so it's hard to avoid. It would be great if we were testing for that, if that was a regulation. It's not. Some companies do third-party testing for that. I think it's really important for baby food. So that's something to consider with anything coming from China. I'm a big tea drinker. I don't drink tea from China, because the tea plants, can absorb all of these heavy metals from the soil. So if you can avoid produce that is produced in China, even if it's organic, I would say to do that. I think most people hear organic and they think that's the number one choice, but sometimes locally produced is a better option. And that's because, one, the transit time is a lot slower, right? So I don't know if you have a Whole Foods or something in your area, but it'll say like, these tomatoes were produced in such and such Florida, right? Like 20 miles away. And so the transit time is going to be reduced. They're going to be more nutrient dense. And a lot of these smaller farms don't have the people or the money to apply for the organic certification. It's not just like, it's not an easy process, right? You have to have an inspector come out and come to your farm and pay all this money and do the things. And some small farms just don't have the ability to do that. So sometimes locally produced is better. And then also, you know, I always tell clients to look at the Environmental Working Group puts out a list every year of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen are the types of produce that are most contaminated with different types of pesticides and heavy metals, and the Clean 15 are the safest. And so, you know, the Clean 15s are ones that you do not have to buy organic, because the conventional varieties are usually pretty safe, where the Dirty Dozen, you should really focus on buying those organic. So it's it wasn't a shock to me. It's not the end of the world, but it's something to be aware of, that if you're consuming even organic produce from China, there's a risk that it could have higher level of metals and other contaminants.
For all those people out there who brag about eating so clean and organic, and you're eating these vegetables and you're making fun of me for having my ketchup, this is what you deserve, okay? I have my Heinz ketchup made in America. That's none of that nonsense. You can have your Chinese vegetables. No, it's that's good information. I assumed that there was still a process in which, once that food is sent over here, like anything else, there is still regulations. It's not like coming directly from there into the freezers without there being some form of regulation process, and or, like you said, their regulation process being oversaw by someone here. So that is good to know. I don't have a Whole Foods near me, at least not within 30 or 40 miles. And I didn't. I did when I was in Oklahoma City, but it's just not a store that I personally shop at. But that is just good to know. Gamified fitness. Is this the future? Do you know what gamified fitness is? Do you know what I mean when I say that?
It's like Wii, like Nintendo Wii, right? Where you're playing like sports.
Yeah.
Video game.
Some people just say, fitness is even gamified in the sense of like Orange Theory. When you go to Orange Theory and like up on the board, it's like, I have to make sure that I'm in the red zone. I'm in the orange zone today. So it could all be considered gamified. But if we push that more towards the spectrum of what you were saying, like, hey, maybe I'm on a treadmill and I'm wearing Oculus, glasses, and I'm inside of a game. I'm inside of an old school game like Doom or Duke Nukem, where I'm in first player mode, and I'm going around with a gun and I'm running away from guys and I'm shooting people in this like fantasy game. But I'm running in all directions, and I'm squatting, and I have to jump, and I have to do all these things. Is that the future? I think it could be. I mean, this is not something that's new. It's been proposed for a while. They have similar things to what I'm saying. I didn't make up what I just said. I've seen it before. Is it going to be big? Is it going to be everywhere? I think it should be. It should be promoted. If you're going to have kids now who are so ingrained into doing this stuff, right? You have stadiums filled now with people playing video games. I think we do need to worry about the health component of this, right? For them sitting down all day long. We talk about how adults have to do it their whole lives, and that's bad enough. But for kids to have to do that, only to then go into adulthood and never really have the opportunity to build the proper musculature and to get healthy, I think that's going to be detrimental long term for their health and for society. So I think we have to find a way to push this more gamified version where, yes, they're on treadmills running around playing these video games. They are moving in all directions. You see these funny videos where they're like running into the walls. Like, we don't want that, right? We don't want like grandpa putting it on and like boxing someone and like, knocking down, the vase or, the grandma's urn and her ashes fall onto the floor.
Oh my gosh.
But I think we do need to find a way to do it. I don't know if it's the future, meaning like everyone's going to do it, but I think it's something we should push kids to do if we're going to let them play video games, at least let them have some sort of iteration where they're moving and not just sitting down and playing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think video games have improved since we've been young, in that, you know, you were able to have your friends over and play, but if it was a rainy day and you stayed inside all day to play video games, you were pretty isolated, right? Where now kids can be at home, especially during COVID, right, and play. I don't know what the newest games are, but they can talk to each other, right? You can be there with your friends, and so that the social aspect is at least there, even if it's virtual. So I think that's big. But yeah, how can we get people moving? Because it's not an understatement to say that sitting is the new smoking, and it's childhood obesity is at a high, and we need to get people out there, right? We need to get people moving. And I think even as adults who grew up playing video games, seeing numbers and things like that, like you said, whether it's Orange Theory, going to a spinning class, right, where your name's on the board, using the fitness trackers. Like, I'm constantly like, did I meet my step goal today? Did I do this? Did I do that? I think those numbers really motivate people. So I think we need to look at it for children and for adults. How can we make fitness more interesting? How can we make it more fun? How can we incorporate it into things that people already think are fun? And I think video games offer a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I don't think this should be like top-down government regulated. I think this has to start from the grassroots, just like families have to look at their individual kids and say, like, is this worth it for my kid? So you can go on the other end of this. Like, there's all these famous basketball players, Luka Doncic, and all these players, Kyler Murray, who are basically like streamers. They play their individual professional sport or train for the sport like 6-7 hours a day, right? They're playing basketball, they're going to the weight room, they're eating, they have nutritionists to do all this stuff. And what they like to do on their downtime is sit down on the couch and play video games. Like, okay, I get it. Like, that's what some people watch movies, some people read books, some people, you know, whatever. Some people are maybe at the bar drinking and having fun. They like to play video games. It's okay for them to do that, right? These guys are busting it on their other end, like, and they're staying healthy in other ways. But that's not the same as, you know, the 8th grader who is 5'6", 280 pounds, and he's slamming back, you know, a bunch of orange sodas and Cheetos while he sits with his headset all day on Sunday, you know, playing whatever is the latest and greatest video game. So I do think it has to be at a, you know, the parental level, the grassroots level. But I really think maybe too, from a physician level, right? You know, I think about my wife who's a pediatrician. It's a good conversation to have with these kids. Be like, you know, what do you she does, because she champions like obesity with her patients. So not to be obese, but to fight it.
So she doesn't champion it.
She champions fighting obesity. So, and she, you know, has conversations like, hey, what do you do? What sort of sports are you in? What are your leisure activities? And I think all pediatricians and general practitioners have to start doing this and be like, oh, you like video games? Well, you should try X, Y, and Z video game that has this attached to it, so we can make sure that you're moving and doing these and so on and so forth. But again, there's no way to force anyone to do it. Ultimately, there has to be some maybe, you know, parental incentive in the local nuclear family that guides that.
Yeah, I wanted to expand on one point you said about, you know, the 8th grader sitting down playing video games and then eating junk food, because I really think one bad decision leads to another, right? If you go out and you're playing flag football with your friends, yeah, maybe you're going to get something to eat after, but you're not pounding candy in the middle of a football game, right? Like, you're playing, you're moving, you're doing things, you're drinking water, you're staying hydrated. But when you sit down in front of a screen, what is most commonly associated with that? Grabbing a snack, right? And then when you grab a snack, maybe you grab a soda if you keep soda in the house. So I think, you know, that's where it starts to snowball. It's not just the sitting all day. It's the junk food associated with it. And then maybe it's the loneliness associated with playing the game that makes you feel bad, that makes you eat more, whatever. But I think it really can snowball. And so if you can nip it in the bud and do the things you were talking about, get the physician involved, get the parents involved to make those changes, the effects could be exponential.
Yeah, and just to continue the talk, because this is sort of circular, right? Where what I mean by that is, I just talked about the physician. What happens though, unfortunately, if that kid is doing exactly what you said, he's sitting down in front of the screen, he's eating the Cheetos, he's drinking his whatever, 6 Cokes, and then he goes to the physician goes, well, we got to start moving more, but here are the medications I believe that you should be on in the interim, right? And they don't address like sort of the root problem, and they're just trying to, deal with the symptoms of said kid, then that leads to a bigger spiral out of control. So I do think, I don't want to talk about like the industry, like the medical industry is trying to get these kids obese or something. But I do think, again, it can't just be reliant upon the physician to make the right choices and to tell the kid, although I think they need to be part of it. I think that the parents have to take the reins and say, listen, there's got to be a limit to how long you're doing this a day. We're not going to have this in the house. We're not going to do this because the fix for somebody who sees you for 15 minutes isn't always the proper fix. The fix to somebody who wakes up and sees you every day is going to have the better answer typically.
100%. Yeah. I tell people health doesn't happen in the doctor's office, right? The 15 to 30 minutes you're with your doctor, whatever, every 6 months, that's not where you get healthy, right? So I laugh when people are like, oh, I got to go figure out what's going on. I got to go to the doctor. And it's like, I can tell you what's going on. You're not sleeping. You're not eating well. You're not exercising. Like there are all these things that happen outside of the doctor's office, all these lifestyle choices you can make that have a profound impact on your health. And it starts at home. It starts with the family. And, not to go too much off on a tangent, but something came out last year where I think the new Surgeon General basically said obesity is genetic and, it's not people's fault. It's genetic. It runs in families. And are there genetic components to metabolism and weight gain? Yes. But the reason why obesity runs in families is because you're not just passing down your genes, you're passing down your habits. If your parents on Saturdays sit around all day on the couch and drink beer and eat potato chips, that's what you're going to do, right? Where if your parents are like, let's go to the park, let's do this, let's get out, let's move around, let's have a salad, let's have fruit, those are also the habits that you're going to pick up. So it's like at home is where the examples get set. And it's so important to recognize that we have to instill healthy habits in our children and model healthy behavior, right? It's not even just saying go outside and play. It's like modeling that, because they really are absorbing all of that, even if they're not, verbally telling us.
And that leads perfectly into the next topic. The Surgeon General has no incentive to not pathologize obesity. Right. He only has incentive to do that, right? Because his industry is then going to pump out the proper medications. There's no incentive to say you can go walk around your local park.
Right, because who's making money from that?
Yeah.
Who's making money by you going to the park? Who's making money from you being healthy enough to not be on medication? And nobody. I can tell you that, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I can tell you that the majority of clients that I see, I'm mainly working with older clients now, 50s, 60s. They're not just on one medication. They're on like 8 medications, right? By the time everyone is on high blood pressure, medicine for high cholesterol, and it's just, metformin for pre-diabetes or already have type 2 diabetes. And so many of these conditions can be treated nutritionally, can be treated with exercise. There's dietitians are present in hospitals for a reason. There's medical nutrition therapy. There's actual foods that can impact your body in ways, that can prevent and manage these conditions. And it's really frustrating to see where we're at today with all of that.
Yeah, and that's why I say you can't really untangle politics from health and medicine. And I don't mean politics like who you're voting for. I mean how the system is run, so to speak, right? So it doesn't really matter who you're voting for. A lot of times it matters, it's zero who you're voting for, because the system just runs as is. So, when we talk about something like Lipitor, right? You take all the studies on drugs of the same ilk, or Lipitor specifically, and I think 4 days is the difference if you're looking at like all-cause mortality. Like you might live 4 more days, and that's not take all the side effects of said drug. And we have to understand that the FDA they don't want to be called in front of Congress, right? That's their incentive. I want to be called in front of Congress. So I want to make sure that medicines not are maximally beneficial, but that they don't necessarily have huge side effects, right? I want to make sure I want to limit the side effects, but that doesn't mean you want to maximize the benefits. So that's one problem. The other problem is they're sort of a nanny state like regulation of all these products, wherein the trial and error gets tampered down, and we don't make as many successful drugs as we should be. So there's something called Moore's Law, and Moore's Law is basically, I'll mess it up a little bit, but in the computer industry, it's like every 2 years, the computing power, or what is inside of like the chips that give the computing power, doubles, right? So obviously we had in 1979, an IBM computer filled up my entire house, and now my watch has more computer power than it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right.
There's the reverse law. So they take the word Moore's backwards. It's not really a law. These are more just observations than like a statistical analysis, or perfect statistical analysis, I should say. And it's the word Moore's backwards, Eroom's law. And Eroom's law says basically the opposite has been happening since 1980, in that all the biological and biotech advances, all the logistical advances we have, all the ways in which we can, the applications of medicine, we've actually been exponentially doing less with medicine, right? We've come out with less beneficial medicines. And this isn't just the approval, the slowed down approval. This is the efficacy, right? And the ability to like push these medicines out and for them to be useful. Why is that? Some people say, well, the argument is that we just came out with so many good medications that they call it like better than the Beatles. Like at some point, like you're not going to make a better album than the Beatles or find a better band, right? But I don't believe that's true, right? I believe that there's so much regulation, and the regulation has bad incentives. They don't have the good incentive models. I'm not telling you that I have the best answer as to what to replace it with, but it doesn't seem to be working if we can't put out medications at the same speed that we can, let's say, increase the chips speed of our computers.
Totally. And, if you think about it, and this isn't conspiracy theory, right? This is economics. If you think about it, the pharmaceutical industry is incentivized to keep you as a repeat customer. What's better for you, Steve? Someone who works out with you once, or someone who's going to work out with you for the rest of your life? I want a long-term client. I want a client that I know and it's easy and is, sending me a check and is going to just show up, right? So they want you to be a long-term customer because it's easier to keep a customer than it is to acquire one. Doesn't matter what business you're in. So if it's just a one and done, that's it. They want to, all of the medications that are coming out are daily or monthly medications that you have to be on for the rest of your life. We're not curing things anymore. We're treating them. We're no longer, and I was in the biotech industry before I pivoted and became a nutritionist. And I started to see, I want to be upstream, right? I don't want to be managing and treating disease. I want to be preventing disease. I want to be, supporting optimal health before we even get there, right? Let's prevent it. Let's optimize health. So, but doctors aren't really, they're not given the time to do that. Like you said, Kayla gets maybe 15, 20 minutes where she's reimbursed by insurance to meet with a client. That's not enough time. So I, as a dietitian, I could take insurance, but I don't, because insurance, again, would only reimburse me for 20-minute conversation. And I need more than that, right? I want to meet with my clients for an hour. Let's go through your whole medical history. Let's talk about everything. Let's, identify the root cause. Let's talk about lifestyle changes. Let's really find a fix, rather than just like writing a prescription. So, there's problems from the top down. And I think, like, similar to what you said when you talked about gamified fitness, I think it has to start at home, right? Because like overnight, you're not going to change the laws. We're not going to change the way that these like regulations are passed or how this works, but you can start at home, right? By becoming a more conscious consumer, by understanding that there are, lifestyle changes that can be put in place before you start a lifetime medication.
Yeah, well said. But I want to go back to something you said and just add to that, and maybe have a little branch off of that. There's a big issue, I think, with people using the term big pharma and leaving that as sort of the last link in the chain, when that's not the case. Big pharma answers to who? The FDA. So there's been pharmaceutical reps that come out that say like, hey, we want to push this drug out, and like we can't. They like the FDA said no, we just absolutely can't. Although, so like take if you ever seen Dallas Buyers Club, which is a movie about AIDS. It's like they had all these like what was considered experimental drugs that people weren't allowed to take because the FDA was saying no, you can't take them. They're like, we're dying. Like the doctor gave me a week. Like, what do you mean I can't take this experimental drug? It's my body. Right. So it's like, so again, this goes back to politics. You have a section of people go, my body, my choice. And it's like, well, but listen to the FDA. It's like, you can't have that both ways. Right. So I think there's something to be said about, long term, at least, not allowing like this big sort of bureaucracy oligarchy to be controlling over what people take and what people don't take, because the pharmaceutical industries, if you just leave it to incentives, yes, there's a bad incentive that you just named, right? The bad incentive is I want you to be a customer for life. But if you allow other pharmacies, right, other pharmaceutical companies to then make that opposite pitch, right? So Steve's Pharmacy says to you, why would you want to be a consumer for life? I invented a medicine that cures you in a month. You're going to come take my medicine, right? But the pharmaceutical companies can't do that because the FDA won't regulate those medications, right? So I think the last link in the chain people just have to realize isn't the pharmaceutical companies. Ultimately, the pharmaceutical companies have to do what they have to do because they're taking orders from the FDA.
Yeah, but I don't want to villainize the FDA either, because they're not the one. Yes, they're creating red tape, right? Because if you believe, I get it, big government versus small government, for things to get approved, they're creating the red tape, but they're not the ones, making all of the money, right? It is the pharmaceutical companies that are making all of the money, and the
Sure.
pharmaceutical companies get to determine, listen, I will equate, let's go full circle here. I will equate big pharma with big food, right? With General Mills and Kellogg's and all of these other things. It's like, if you go abroad, if you go to Europe right now and you buy Trix cereal, I don't even know if that exists anymore. Lucky Charms, okay? They're made with different ingredients than they are here because the EMA has more strict regulations with food dyes and coloring and natural flavor. So it's different ingredients. You read the label. The same thing goes similar with pharmaceuticals. It may not be different ingredients, but it's different pricing, right? We are gouged for pharmaceuticals here. You can go abroad and get them for much cheaper. Same drug, same company, everything. It's just cheaper there because the government has regulated that the pharmaceutical companies must drive their costs down.
Well, that's not the main reason, but go on. I'll tell you why that's the case, but go on.
Okay. But there is a benefit, so I think there's not one villain, it's the entire system, right? Because what we really need to do is be incentivizing doctors to say, oh, John Smith came in today and you didn't have to put him on any medication. Well, then you get, here's a bonus for you, right? We need to be incentivizing doctors and the whole healthcare community to be keeping people healthy, incentivizing people, right? Employers. It needs to happen on every level.
Yeah, but another reason why they're so cheap overseas. So there's a process called harmonization. So it's big in the computer industry. So like if I own a gift registry. If you go on shameless plug, skipwish.com, if you want to have a gift registry for whatever, you can start one on skipwish.com. On skipwish.com, you can sign in, you can log in via, let's say, Facebook. I think we might have took the Facebook one off. Maybe you can log in via Google now or something, whatever, right? That's called like a harmonization process. And that helps, right? That it makes things easier. Well, that applies in big pharma from the US to the UK. So we do all the research. Our FDA regulates everything. These companies are paying 30% higher than they used to cost to create something. But then the UK says, oh, the US already did all this regulations. So we have very little regulation at this point because we're just going to oversee what they already did. And that's why they drives their costs down, because they don't end up paying for those costs, which is another whole problem too. It's like, if these drugs are going to help the whole world, you would hope that like
about like the compound pharmacies, you're talking about like a generic. So it's like if someone comes out with whatever, then the generic version, they've just leveraged it and that's why it can be cheaper.
No, just imagine there's a new drug created tomorrow, right? That whatever, it helps constipation, and it has to go through all these like stage 3 clinical trials, right? Double blinds, and it goes through these trials, and then it gets approved somewhere here in America. There was a company that had to do all this R&D research too on the front end, right? So the company's called Steve Washuta Pharmaceuticals. The European and the EU can now accept that drug on the basis, right, without having to do their own in-depth research. So do a little bit of research. So my company paid for all the R&D. That's why the price is driven up, because we have to recoup that money. But the drug that just gets passed over to Europe, then it's different, because yes, it's another company making that drug. It's not Steve Washuta Pharmaceuticals over there. It's just a proprietary sort of like ingredients, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess you can call it generics long term.
It's the other company, yeah, because the EMA still does, they have regulations. Sometimes, again, they're more strict than the FDA. Sometimes something will be approved here and isn't approved in Europe, or Europe has stricter standards about how things are manufactured. But yeah, it's the burden of debt, and the burden of debt lies on the company that does the R&D. But that's why they have I forget what it's called, but they have a rule where sometimes there can't be a generic for many years. Have you heard of that? Like when you
Sure.
come out with Lipitor and it's like an IP, it's like a patent rule. Okay, this drug is so great and you spent so much money on it that you get 5 years where no one can make a similar drug. But you make a good point. It happens on every level. It's the regulating agencies, it's the pharmaceutical companies, it's the doctor's office, and it's at home, right? So a lot of that is out of our control. Where can you start?
There was just a recent study put out. So they've been doing these trials for a while with MDMA being used to help PTSD. And it makes sense if anyone's ever taking MDMA, guilty as charged. So it makes sense why that would help people with PTSD. It makes you more empathetic. It makes you see sort of like a more loving side to the world, right? And it makes sense. But there is a euphoria that comes along with it. So they did these studies, right? These double-blind studies, and they basically although they passed even like the phase 3 of these studies, it then went to some independent group that the FDA basically has. They call them experts, who has oversight over everything else, and they turned it down. And basically they said, well, it can't really be a double blind because anyone who experienced euphoria knows that they took the drug. And if you didn't experience the euphoria, you know that you didn't take the drug. Therefore, it's like, well, we ended up going into the study. So you had people spend, who knows, tens of millions, if not more, hundreds of millions of dollars on these like longitudinal studies and taking up all these times and people. And then you say like, the euphoria component, which should have already been understood that it was a characteristic of the drug. This is why we're throwing this out. No, you're throwing it out because it's an easy fix to a problem that you don't want to be fixed easily, most likely because there's some other reasons why. So it's just, that's not to say I don't have an answer for it. We need regulations. We need some form of regulations. Yeah. But how do we get those incentives to all in line where we are actually just trying to push the best medications out there? I don't know the answer to that, but I know we're not doing a good job of it right now.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, this has been another episode of the Trulyfit Podcast. Becca, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you specifically on Instagram, or reach out to you if they have any questions concerning nutrition or otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Instagram is Happy Healthy Nutritionist, and my website is the same, happyhealthynutritionist.com.
Awesome. Thanks for listening in, guys, and see you on Thursday and Monday.